Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. Here you will learn all things related to healing from divorce, mind, body, and spirit, so you can create a beautiful new life filled with happiness. I'm Rachel Ruby, author of Divorce to Bliss, divorce coach, speaker, and attorney, and I'm so glad you found me here. Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. I'm Rachel S. Ruby, and we are going to be talking today about how divorce affects the brain and the body. Because, of course, as I always say, knowledge is power. And if you know about these types of things, it can help you in your healing journey. My guest today is Dr. Monique Thompson. She is a licensed mental health clinician, life coach, best-selling author with over 24 years of experience helping individuals and couples heal from infidelity, trauma, and emotional crisis. She's the author of Infidelity Recovery Workbook for Couples, Tools and Exercises to Rebuild Your Relationship, which has sold over 10,000 copies worldwide. Dr. Thompson brings a powerful voice to healing, helping people rebuild trust, find clarity, and restore their emotional peace. I'm so happy to have her here today. So welcome, Dr. Thompson, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah, love to have you. So let's jump into some of these fascinating things. And first off, I want to ask you, what happens to the brain when someone goes through a divorce or ends a relationship? And I'm just going to ask you two parts, and then you can jump in and start. And then tell us about the two nervous systems, how they both work in these situations, and how they affect decision making.
Well, those are good questions. But let me make sure I got this. So the decision making and the divorce and like what happens maybe immediately, maybe what happens over time. I'm going to try to dive into all three of those, but you have to keep me to it because this is a lovely topic and it has so many different curves and winds to it. So I'll keep going. You have to bring me in. So immediately, we look at what we experience when a change happens first, because at the bottom, it is simply a change. It's kind of a pedestrian thing. It's a change. So anytime your human brain experiences a change, it kind of has a uh-oh response to it. And it wants to understand, is this, and how do I label this? Is this good? Is this bad? So immediately your brain is going to pocket this experience of divorce into a category of eustress, meaning maybe you were looking forward to the divorce and you're celebrating it and you're happy that it's done and you're about to have the party of the year because you're so happy. That could actually happen. Eustress, distress. You did not want this to happen. You're taken off guard. Perhaps you had no idea things were even that bad. People have been served before who had no idea at all. That could possibly be it. You could be in a level of chronic stress with this. Perhaps you've been in a pretty tumultuous marriage and it's been, oh, we're getting divorced. No, we're not going to get divorced. We're separated. We're going to try to work things out. Now, you've been so back and forth with this that it could actually be experienced as a chronic stressor. And then there's traumatic stress. Unfortunately, there are, experiences people have that are on the edges of reasons why people get divorced that involve abuse, violence, really, bad things. And so you may experience traumatic stress because of the divorce. But your brain, the first thing it's going to do is try to figure out, where does this belong? And then your response to it is, in a large sense, weighted on what did your brain decide about this experience. Now, whatever you're thinking this experience is, you have an emotional response that follows. So those are some of the very, very first things that happen. And depending on what you decided it was, your brain is going to want you to manage to back to normalcy. So that's what happens next. We don't really live in any of those states. Your brain wants to get back. It's kind of a peanut butter and jelly vanilla brain. We really do all have. It wants things the same every day. It wants a lot of structure. It wants you to go to bed at the same time every day. It wants you to have nutrition and water. It really is a really, simplistic but complicated system. So the next thing your brain wants you to do is get back to normalcy. So those are some of the immediate things that happen. Yeah.
Okay. And what are the two different nervous systems, and how do they work in these situations where our brain is experiencing something that's so different that it's causing us grief or sadness, or we've experienced trauma or whatever it may be?
So, I'm glad you mentioned grief, because I did not talk about that. So grief is something that you're going to have, which when we're talking about those different types of ways you're going to title it, it doesn't matter which way you title it, you're going to experience grief. You're going to experience grief. And the way that you might experience it because it's a divorce is different than how you might experience it if someone were to actually like pass away through death, something like that. The truth is, the research tells us that it's actually harder. That divorce is a more difficult grief process than someone being lost through death, because the death gives you what happens when you lose somebody close to you. People, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. You get a lot of community support. People are understanding. It makes sense to them that you kind of want to check out, or however you grieve. People say, grieve the way you need to grieve. But when it's a divorce, people are not always so understanding. They can even be nosy. They can actually pile on more problems. So it has a different community response. But when you're going through those two systems, to get back to answering your question, you have your basic nervous system, which is that helps you to kind of respond well to your environment. But you're not there. You're not there. You tend to be in your fight or flight, your sympathetic nervous system, instead of in your parasympathetic nervous system, which is where we want you to be. When you're watching TV and they talk about stress-related illnesses and stress is the number one killer, they're talking about your sympathetic nervous system or your fight or flight nervous system. That's where you're pumped full of full of stress hormones, and your heart rate goes up, and you find it difficult to concentrate. You have agitation, all these heavy experiences, and you want to kind of exit that. But if you're in the middle of a divorce, it's day after day after day of stunning experiences. Maybe because you're getting a divorce, you have to move. Or perhaps you have to switch how you're doing your life every day. Your kids are going to be with you these days, not with you these days. People experience loss of friendships, like who inherits the friends. And I've had couples who struggle even with something that you wouldn't think would be right there on the edge of traumatic, but losing your pet. Maybe you shared a beloved pet, and now we figure out, where does the dog go? Where does the cat go? So even those kinds of things.
I have a whole podcast on that.
I believe, yes.
Who gets the dog? Who keeps the dog?
Who gets the dog? Right, who gets the dog? Yeah. And I don't know, there may be some legal things in there that kind of establish it, but people really find it difficult. The kids, you go to court and they're going to tell you, but the dog, the cat, So, but those two symptoms and systems, and when you're not sleeping well, people have a loss of appetite. They don't want to eat. They may really, really, work a number on your entire body physically. Mm-hmm. And this is the exact time that you need to be able to think. You actually need to be on your toes. And this will take you away from the system you need, which is working best when you're in your parasympathetic nervous system. When you're in your rest and digest mode, your relaxed state, you can come up with all kinds of beautiful, strategic, forward-thinking ideas. When you're not in that system, that's when we see you on Snapped. when terrible ideas seem like a good idea at the time, and because you're thinking with the part of your brain that just wants you out of pain, it is not strategic. It is fairly infantile in its remedies. It's not sophisticated. So that's the part of you that says, just destroy all their stuff. Well, now you have a case pending against you. So you just you're not thinking through to the end of things because it's not a logic model. So that's the problem when you're going through a divorce, is that because you're in that system, you got to slow down a little bit so that your ideas and your decisions are aligned with who you really are, your real person. So that's ideal. Yes. Yeah,
that's so interesting because it's almost like a reaction versus a response, right? Because if you're in your sympathetic nervous system and you're feeling all that stress and that pressure, and a lot of us will at that point react because we're under so much pressure. And and that's why I always, talk to my clients and say, if you're having a moment like that, you can stop, catch yourself, close your eyes, take a breath, or walk out and say, I'll be right back, or hang up and I'll call you right back, whatever it is. Just take a moment to pause and get yourself in that non-reactive place, right? So that you can think about like, okay, what do I really want to convey here? Other than, I don't want to say, you're a jerk. I want to kill you. What is the point of this? And what do I want? And then you can voice it better because you're coming from your parasympathetic nervous system, right? So, so that's so interesting to understand the difference between the two so that we can catch ourselves. Yeah.
There's time parameters. I mean, people are really trying to figure out, like, how long do I pause? How long do I pause? Because sometimes when they're pausing, they're having ruminating thoughts. So they're just circling back through, or they're having obsessive thoughts and they can't keep themselves from texting one more time or checking. So really, and we're presuming, of course, that there's no pre-existing serious mental health condition. So, start there. If there's no pre-existing serious mental health condition, you probably could get yourself at least out of that system within about 90 seconds. You possibly could. If you coming into it, were already working with a life coach. You already had a therapist. You already had a pretty healthy lifestyle. You already practiced meditation. You already had a pretty healthy nutritional lifestyle when it comes to your brain health and your organ health. You already had a pretty good sleep cycle. You're a fairly healthy person. And you've been already practicing healthy emotional stress coping, self-soothing. You have maybe some healthy practices. It would be reasonable for us to expect that you could self-soothe within about 90 seconds, legitimately 90 seconds. Now, there's a science on it, right? So this isn't a number Dr. Thompson's making up. So it's actually, there's science on it. But let's say you were under a lot of stress already in the marriage. You already were not sleeping well. Maybe there were some significantly terrible events leading up to the divorce. You already had like a stressful day going on. It's still reasonable.
Yeah.
For you to be able to, like you said, pause for 20 minutes minimum. And I know people can't see me take my glass off, but this is called accountability. There is no biological reason why you should not be able to pause for 20 minutes and be de-escalated. Now, sometimes the situation is provocative. Like maybe you're trying to calm down, but you're in the situation. Maybe you're talking to your partner and they are, this is aggravating and you're trying to, so it's going to possibly take longer. But the minute you start engaging in that pause, you can almost set your watch to that about 20 minutes in, you're at least walking out of that system and then say, okay, and in 2 hours, I should be long gone from this neighborhood if I keep exiting. So let's say that you take 20 minutes to pause. They say something that sets the clock all the way back and you don't do anything this time to pause. Well, now it's going to take you right. So your brain is, in the meantime, we learned so much about neuroplasticity. Like your brain learns what you teach it. So if you are practicing getting anxious, you're going to get very good at getting anxious. If you practice recovery and keep practicing recovery, you're going to get very good at recovery. So it is exactly what you said. If you practice the pause, you're teaching your brain to pause. And we see these beautiful neural pathways start developing that your brain says, oh, do that. And you go and do that easily. But let's say you never practiced that and you get very good at screaming, yelling, cussing, hollering, throwing things. You're just going to be an expert at that. Yeah. And that's not what you want to do. So that's your autonomic nervous system. You want to get very, very good within your autonomic nervous system, you have your parasympathetic and sympathetic. But in there, you want to live in your parasympathetic nervous system. It's where you want to live. And you want to live there for so many beautiful reasons, not the least of which is teaching your brain that that's where you want to be.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a question for you. So you mentioned a while back, you told me about the 90-second rule. And you mentioned a while back the 90-second rule, and then you started talking about 20 minutes. So can you tell us what is the 90-second rule, just for clarification purposes?
Okay, got
since
it,
you
got it,
touched
yes.
base, you touched on that.
Yes,
and then
yes.
let's see, what techniques can people learn when they're going through the divorce healing process, and they need to get the brain into that relaxed state? And I think that's what you were talking about when you just kind of take the 20 minutes, right? But yeah, let's just give a broad overview of the 90-second rule, because I thought that was fascinating. Yeah.
The broad brush of it. Yes, okay. So your 90 seconds is the entire time that it takes your brain, biologically speaking, to experience the emotion, whether this is happiness, sadness, anger, whatever it is. The entire biological process is just 90 seconds long. So at the end of that 90 seconds, you can make a choice. The human is perfectly capable of pushing the button and restarting that entire process over and over and over again, indefinitely. But if you this, and it's a little bit like going to the bathroom, if you will, you can't you're not going to be able to avoid that biological process either. So if something provokes you, just sit through it for 90 seconds. Just trust it. It's still happening for 90 seconds. And just sit through it. Like sitting through the storm, you sit there and just kind of watch it happen. And then after those 90 seconds, you can start engaging in your self-soothing behavior. So after that 90 seconds, yes, engaging in yourself.
So the 90-second is the pause, which allows your brain to experience it fully, whatever emotion you're feeling fully. And then you can start engaging in the calm down techniques, breathing or whatever, meditate, whatever you may do.
Whatever works for you, yes. But there's so many fun things, like home remedies, if you will, that genuinely have evidence-backed medicinal properties. Going outside for 11 minutes minimum and having sunlight exposure. It helps your oxytocin levels to just go down on there. I mean, your oxytocin is a totally different. Now, I mean, I'm going to say cortisol. But your cortisol level to go down gently on its own.
Yeah.
Oxytocin, you release that just by thinking about people that you love, connecting with them either by text message, calling them on the phone, leave voicemail, just connecting in some way. We used to think it was the physical contact that you had to have the 5 hugs a day. It turns out that if you just allow yourself to sit and really think about that person and think about memories of somebody who really does care about you and think with gratitude about them, and if you take it a further step and actually reach out to them, you release oxytocin. That is beautiful because it has a healing effect literally on your heart. There are receptor sites on your heart that bind to oxytocin, and it has a healing effect for the adverse effects of stress. So those are like small things you can do that within a few minutes, you feel this natural high, and your heart rate goes down. So now you're entering into the relaxed state. Lots of home remedies, right? Lots and lots of deep breathing. You could do a lot of different ones, but I'm going to tell your listeners one that is like on the spot, which I don't even do during the day because it puts you to sleep. But the 4-7-8 breathing exercise, that one specifically helps to really rescue you out of that fight or flight response. So you inhale 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. There's a beautiful TED talk on gosh, I can't remember his name, but it's called Breathe to Heal. And that one walks you through that breathing exercise. It's an ancient breath work, but 4-7-8 helps you to really, really get well suited into your parasympathetic nervous system.
Fantastic.
Lots of other stuff, right? Aromatherapy, music. Actually, I'm telling y'all,
dancing,
podcast. Turns out, listen to a podcast like this. Seriously, it works. It works. Yes, it works. So listening to someone else talking about a problem that you identified with helps you to cope. And guess how long we've been knowing that? Since the 70s. Dr. Donald Meichenbaum, Dr. Donald Meichenbaum was one of the first pioneers to investigate, like, how do we learn? How do we learn when we're under stress? And he did an experiment to get people to handle non-poisonous snakes. And what worked was when a person who was doing it would talk out loud about their experience, and the listener would learn fast. Yes. So that's where even our learning models in psychology of learning come from, is that it turns out when a person is talking out loud about their experience and you hear it and identify with the story, you learn faster. So podcasts actually have that benefit to you're listening to things like this.
Interesting.
Saturate your brain, help you to learn, help you make connections, and it helps you to not feel so alone.
So here's that, when you're feeling like that, you can just turn on my other podcasts and you can listen.
Yeah, seriously.
That's great. That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's the science of podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. There's some great podcasts out there for sure. You told me that there are signs of sympathetic overdrive after divorce. So can you discuss what this means and what those are?
Yeah. So listening to your body is key here. When you're going through a divorce, you want to pay attention to your body. Now, fortunately, we have all these new tools. Our phones can tell us our heart rate. Your phone can tell you how well you slept.
Yeah.
It's kind of gross, but you can order online the little swab to check your own cortisol level. I mean, you can find out if your body is experiencing stress. But there are a lot of ways to tell if if this is really happening to you. Your sleep is the first step. Always. Always. The sleep is the first thing. So if you're having trouble falling asleep, which means that if your head hits the pillow and it's taking you longer than 15 minutes is really my limit, but 5 or 10 minutes is ideal. And really, I like for your head to hit the pillow and you go to sleep. So this one is, are you falling asleep upon going to bed? Mm-hmm. The other is, are you staying asleep? Are you flowing through your sleep cycles throughout the evening? And then are you waking up feeling refreshed? And sometimes life happens. You have a late night. Maybe you have a sick kid. Maybe you're not feeling good. You have 1 or 2 nights. But if it is more nights than not, we are in trouble. So then there's no getting around it. Like if it is, you look at a calendar and you say from day 1 to day 7, how many nights did I have good rest? And the nights do not number well, then yes, there is a problem. The first thing I recommend people do is be a better parent to yourself. Parent yourself better, because you never let that slide with a little kid. You notice this child is not, and you do something about it. So the first thing is to do something about it, but only give yourself 2, maybe 3 weeks at the most before you go see somebody. And your first step actually is just your regular, plain old everyday family doctor. Go in, tell them what's going on, let them know. Tell them this has been happening for a while or has it not? They're going to ask you some questions. Often I find that people had pre-existing poor sleep habits that were made worse when going through a divorce. And the problem with that particular symptom, this is why I'm focusing here, is that one now is causal to the others. Mm-hmm. So having night after night of poor sleep, your daytime heart rate is dysregulated. Your hippocampus, which helps you to manage your emotions, dysregulated. The highway between your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala, dysregulated. So it's just a negative snowball effect that the first thing to pay attention to is, am I sleeping well? And unfortunately, also paying attention to how you're trying to go to sleep. Mm-hmm. Are you drinking to go to sleep? Using other, are you do something healthy to try to fix it. Yeah, but that's the first place. That's the first thing to go. Unfortunately, is sleep, and then in that golden hours of sleep as well. People tend to stay up late trying to get business taken care of when they're going through a divorce, because that's the time when they feel like they can focus and concentrate. But if you're missing what we call the golden hours of sleep, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. You really want to get rest during that time. You can have 1 night, you can have 2. But again, paying attention to more nights than not within a 7-day period. Am I sleeping well?
Yeah, it sounds like you just have to really be aware, be cognizant of what changes might be occurring or what things might be going on that are making you feel, for example, tired or more stressed. Or, obviously you're going through the divorce that makes you feel stressed. It can make you feel all those things, but the changes, I guess, and the patterns is what you're looking for. So you want to be aware of that. That's why I always encourage people to write things like that down in their journal, because then you can see, if you're getting really irritable and you realize, oh, I didn't sleep well for the last several nights. Right. So then, so that's great.
Right.
What about
reduce it to writing?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no problem. So let's go back to that parasympathetic nervous system and talk a little bit about how we can activate that in order to heal. If we're starting our healing journey, what can we do to really stimulate that parasympathetic system so we can be more living in that and making decisions from that?
It's so much fun. And this is where I live all day. Because I do this all day, right? I do this all day. I've been for 24 years. For 24 years, my all day, every day has been working with clients as both a therapist and life coach. I work with couples all around the world. This is my everyday, all day, and I enjoy it. But I'm also, with my therapist hat on, I'm an LPC supervisor, which means I license people to get their credentials. When the breath, right? This is hard to do, but not impossible to do.
Okay.
Hard, but not impossible.
Give us some tips that we can do, like daily tips that we can do.
So I want to normalize this. Even for therapists, this is hard. It is not impossible. But here's the thing that even I do. You can't hear it. I can. There's music playing in the background. I leave music playing in the background pretty much all day long. I have a Bluetooth right in the room behind me, so I can hear it, but the person I'm live with cannot hear it. And it has a long playlist, of the music that I know will help. Music helps to regulate your heart rate. So even if you're in a bad mood and you don't feel like talking to anybody, you don't feel like taking a walk, you don't feel like doing anything healthy, you just want to cuddle up with a blanket and just forget the whole world. If you can just keep music playing, it helps your heart to regulate without you doing anything. So one is music, especially when you're going through a divorce and you might have had great habits. You don't feel like doing anything. So when you don't feel like doing anything, music can help. Another one that can really help, get you quickly out of a rut, is to pull yourself into the company of other people. So let's say that you do work from home. This is the time to work from home in an environment where other people are. The library, the coffee shop, some being not literally physically alone. This is a good time to connect with people and say thank you. So all of us have a list of people who've been there for us in our lives, who've done something for us. And you reaching out to that person and just saying, hey, I remember, such and such time, and you were really there for me. I just wanted to call and tell you, thank you. So that specific kind of gratitude, you're reaching back to tell a person who helped you, thank you, is another way. These specific things help lift you biologically, chemically, into what we call your happy chemicals. And now, even though you're still grieving, all you're doing is grieving. You're not in any of those stress places that I mentioned at the very beginning. Yeah. You're not going to be able to avoid the grief. That's just going to naturally occur, but it's healthy grieving. I call it like the water grieving, where the water's flowing, versus volcanic grieving, where there's just explosions everywhere and you're running from the hot lava. You really want to allow the grief to be beautiful and flowing. And that kind of grief, even you can grow from it. You can grow from it. You can become your better self. The volcanic version, and that's die, die, kill, kill, right? So we don't want that. We want the other kind. So music, keep it playing. Reach out to people who have ever helped you, ever helped you. And just say thank you. Just say thank you. Those are two immediate things you can do.
Okay. That's fantastic. Let's see. I know you mentioned trauma, and I had a whole podcast dedicated to that in divorce, and it was abusive, marriages. And can you tell us about what EMDR is and how it can help someone who feels emotionally stuck after a divorce or betrayal and things like that?
Yes. So I'm going to be specific here on what kinds of EMDR. So there is a way to do self-administered EMDR. I don't recommend self-administered EMDR if you have what we call a high ACE score, high adverse childhood. Well,
what is EMDR? So
EMDR. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is what EMDR stands for. And it is a method of helping your brain to recover from trauma, to biologically recover from trauma that does not require medicine. So it requires what we call bilateral stimulation, BLS, which simply means left, right, left, right. So when you're doing EMDR, you're going to first start off with what you would think we wouldn't want you to do, but we do, which is locate a target of the most distressing part of a distressing event. So you're going to target that part, right? And then using the BLS, you're going to process that target until you get to the desensitization, meaning instead of it really riling you up, you're able to look at that part of the memory and you are feeling calm. You're feeling peaceful. Now that you've gotten down to 0 on feeling distressed, we work on the reprocessing, which is being able to assign a thought or meaning to this event that is not traumatic. So in other words, you may, instead of thinking, I felt powerless, I felt hopeless, I felt like I was so alone, you started, actually I wasn't alone. My neighbor heard me and came right over. Or, actually I used my power, spoke up, and I got everything I could do done. And I did feel a loss, but I also gained some really lifelong friends through this. So you're able to find the full picture, the most authentic response to that event, and feel calm. It doesn't mean you won't feel the grief. Like I mentioned, you still grieve, you still feel sad, but the trauma is relieved. And we can see it. We can physically see it on a brain scan. Dr. Daniel Amen has done numerous studies showing the difference before and after EMDR. It takes about 8 EMDR sessions for you to notice the difference in the brain. So when someone has trauma, this is something that you consider doing EMDR. You should find someone who's trained in EMDR to do that specific thing for you. But sometimes even before I was trained in it, I would just shop that out to someone. I would refer people to my local colleagues who do EMDR. I actually offer it now, so I do it in-house, but many EMDR trained therapists will take on that piece of work while somebody's maybe working with a life coach or another therapist who's not trained in it. The EMDR therapist can do that section of it for them. But back to what did we get? So, you can do it on your own. There's a score called your ACE score. NPR has, if you want to Google NPR ACE, what the score means, they have a free self-assessment. It takes you 2 seconds to do, and it'll give you your score. If your ACE score is above a 2, I do not recommend that you do self-administered EMDR. If it is above a 2, then yes, still do it, but do it with a person who is trained in it. If it's below a 2, go for it. I just go for it. There's a ton of workbooks out there that will walk you through how to do it. You mentioned going for a walk earlier, and I was over here going, yes, go for a walk. That's bilateral stimulation. Left, right, left, right. So if you have a low ACE score and you're going through a divorce, get ready to go for a walk. You need to walk for longer than 20 minutes. But you start off thinking about all of the stuff you do not like about this situation, about your pain. You start off with your pain point, and then you walk until you start having clear thoughts, until you start feeling peace. And then it's not just at that point that you've emotionally calmed down. You're not just in your parasympathetic system at that point. At that point, true biological healing has started to occur. Yes.
Yeah. I have to tell you that walking is what saved me when I first split with my former husband. I started walking a lot, and I got up to 6 miles a day. And that was my saving grace, because really, like you said in the beginning, it was just walking to just get out the feelings and just get you move and feel better. But then it just became like this whole appreciation thing of being outside and the sky and the sun and the clouds and the trees and the bird song. And I was with my dog, so she was my walking partner, but it just became this thing that I had to do. And I still do that. All these years later, I still have to walk, because it's really it grounds me. So I love that idea.
You're a natural scientist. So you asked about Francine Shapiro, the person who discovered and created this. That's how she found out about it. She was out on a walk. Could not make this happen. She was out on a walk and she noticed that a disturbing thought that she had was suddenly gone. Yeah. And this is where it began. This is where the research began. And you're right. You're walking for a longer period of time. You start having clear thoughts and you just keep doing it and keep doing it. So you did that. You not only helped yourself to cope, but you also helped to protect the health of your entire body. Plus, you had the dog with you, which took it to another notch. Seriously, doing it outside with the pet and the walking. Yeah. This like this huge, beautiful recipe for not just emotionally feeling better, but literally biologically being better. That was nice.
And from there comes the paying attention. I mean, I've always been very healthy, but from all that walking, you start, watching what you're putting in your body and you're drinking more water because you're walking. And so, and you're stretching more. And so you have all these good, endorphins and all these great, just things that come off of incorporating that into your. So I have a lot of clients too that say like, I don't like to exercise. And I say, well, you can do a couple things that are really simple. One is walking and the other is turning on some great music and dancing, because either one of those, and that incorporates the music too, like you said. So there's lots of things you can do. So that's fantastic. Well, so much great information here. I love this. I love giving tips to people who are going through this so they can figure out what they can do to help themselves and maybe seek help if they need. Which of course, I think a lot of people going through this do need help at some point because it can get overwhelming. But why don't you do this? Because I love that you have this workbook. And where can my viewers and my listeners find you if they want more information, and where can they find your book? And we'll have that up in the show notes as well for everybody.
Okay. Yes. DrMoniqueThompson.com. My name is kind of long, so it's Dr. DLCTOR Monique MONIQUE and Thompson THOMPSON. DrMoniqueThompson.com.
Okay, great. And everything's there so they can learn more about you. Fantastic. Yeah. This has been you've been a wonderful source of information. So thank you so much for joining me today and helping. And if you like this podcast, please give it the thumbs up. Please please share, tell your friends about this, because that is how we get excited that we're putting out this great content for you and can find more great guests like Dr. Thompson. So thank you for being here today. And I really appreciate it.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.